What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to rank all 8 characters in Crash Team Rumble from worst to best. Now, let me get this out of the way very, very early. I truly believe if you focus and if you play the characters how they're intended to play, I don't think there is, quote-unquote, a bad character. I prefer some more than others. I do think there are some that are better than others, but I don't think there's any that are, like, downright awful. I think if you use them to the best of their ability, you can be successful. So keeping that in mind, don't be mad when your favorite character is dead last or in the bottom tier. But here we go, starting with number 8. This is actually a full 180 from the demo because I put her at number 1. I'm actually going to say it's Tana. I think Tana is number 8 on this list. And the reason I just believe, well, firstly, if you just look at scores, I think she is the weakest of that group. She's the least mobile in terms of getting around. I do think that's important. I would say her biggest flaw, though, is her kind of special attack. So everybody's got a special thing about them, right? And for her, it's the magnet kind of up-down, right? She throws an enemy into the air and then slams them down. Now, in certain circumstances, this can be extremely good, and you can find those circumstances. In fact, it's probably best to try to do it around an edge, right? Where you could knock somebody over, you could have somebody kind of like in the air and knock them down where they'll just die not being able to get back on the platform. But if we're looking at everybody else and we're looking at her ability to get from point A to point B as a scorer, you know, she's got obviously the basic attacks. Again, she's not horrible. I've done extremely well with her. I just think she's the weakest of the group, primarily because of her special ability. Her biggest strength, I would actually say, is her kind of grappling hook. It's an incredible way of getting out of danger. It can do damage to enemies as well if you use it in an attacking style, but if you're just trying to run away, it's a good way of kind of bridging the gap very, very quickly and in a unique way that, as far as what I've been playing, people don't really know how to handle. People can't really keep up with her when she does that, just because maybe they're not used to it. But she is number 8. Number 7, I'm going to go Dingo Dial. I feel pretty good putting Dingo Dial here. I don't know if I'd get many complaints. Here's the thing. When you start to unlock the other blockers, Dingo Dial, I do think, becomes expendable. There are some benefits of Dingo Dial versus Embryo and Entropy, but I just think, you know, again, if you're looking at a team, if you're looking at building a team, I really don't think you need a Dingo Dial. So obviously, you know, his strengths are the attacks and also his tankiness. He is the most tanky of any of those blockers. Embryo, obviously, when he becomes, you know, gigantic, I guess that would maybe be the most. But in terms of just your minute-to-minute, you know, play style, Dingo Dial is the most tanky. Now, with that being said, I feel like he can be exploited very, very easily. A lot of things coming from above him you can't really deal with, so any kind of stomping attack, any long-range attack. Now, Dingo Dial has long-range attacks in terms of the vacuum, right? And you can use this to slow enemies down. You can use it kind of for like cheap stealing the Wampa fruit away from them. Again, not a bad character, and I've done okay as Dingo Dial, and I've seen other people do okay. I just think once you get the other blockers, you may not want to go back. I've seen plenty of teams succeed without a Dingo Dial. I just don't think you need him. And ultimately, a really big thing that, again, you notice when you get the other blockers, because he is the most tanky, and obviously he's supposed to be this way, his ability to get from point A to point B is horrendous. It is the worst, I would say, of any of the 8 characters, right? He can barely jump. He has to do the little like double jump when he uses the vacuum to kind of boost him up. It's just not good. And again, now he's supposed to be that way, but you can't really get away from anybody. So if you're trying to run away, that's not going to work. You can't really chase anybody, and that's a really big thing. If you're using Dingo Dial to just camp the other, you know, team's base, that could work, and I've obviously seen it work quite well. But if you're using it like out in the field to disrupt the enemies, right, to stop them getting Wampa fruit, I think Embryo or Entropy are much, much better. And then I do better just myself. I do better as boosters and scorers than I do blockers anyway. So that's why Dingo Dial is so low. Number 6, I'm going to put another blocker. I'm going to put Embryo. So he's tough, man. He is extremely tough. He's hard. He's a very hard character to get used to. He's supposed to be that way if you look at like the challenge level of each of these characters. I don't know if he's the highest, but he's definitely one of the highest. He's tough. So with him, I think it totally depends on how you play him, right? Because when you drink the potions and you become, you know, gigantic, that is very powerful. And you can use that. You can jump into somebody, so somebody's trying to run away from you. If you hit them in the air, if you like kind of collide with them in the air, you'll still do damage. You do an incredible amount of damage as that, okay? The issue is, as normal Embryo, the character, you are very weak. Now, he can get around. He's pretty okay at getting around, so you don't have to use him as a blocker. Him throwing potions is a good move, but you got to have good aim, right? Those slime monsters aren't very powerful when they're the slime monsters. They're more powerful if he hits you with a potion. So when you whip the potion, you're obviously trying to hit the, opponent, and that's tough. That's tough because if they're moving around, you might not be able to do it, and that's one of his most powerful attacks. And then beyond that, he doesn't have a lot of health. He is pretty weak. He relies on drinking the potions. And I would say the final thing that puts him so low and just stops him, I guess, from being so high, right? The inverse of that, it takes forever for him to drink those potions, and you can get knocked out of it. I think he can take 3 or 4 hits before he becomes big, but it's actually relatively easy to stop an Embryo from drinking that potion. It's actually laughably easy. So that, to me, really stops it. If he was unbeatable, if you couldn't knock him out of that, I think he'd be higher. But that does require you to use it in different circumstances. At the same time, using it as like a sneak attack is tough because it only lasts 6 or 7. I counted it out loud. He's only in that state 6 or 7 seconds. So if you drink the potions far away from an enemy to not get knocked out of it, by the time you run over to them with your Hulk smash, you're going to turn back into the normal Embryo. So that really, I think the timing, his time limit there really, really hurts that character. I also think he's very easy to deal with. So while Dingo Dial, is, I would say, kind of hard one-on-one, but he does have his weaknesses in terms of top-down attacks. Embryo, I don't really think is that difficult to get around. I think you just run away from him when he's big. He can't really keep up with most characters, even in that state. And then, one-on-one, as long as you kind of manage him throwing downward when he does his down attack, which is just throwing a potion, I think you can beat him most times. I don't really think he's that much of a threat. And as a blocker, that's kind of your whole point, is to be a threat to attack the other enemy. And if you can just run away from him, to me, that's not good enough. So that's why he is number 6. Number 5, I'm putting the final blocker, Entropy. What's tough about her is she feels like a blocker, but she also really doesn't. She feels like she kind of can do anything, and I guess that's why I like her. I gravitate towards the more speedy characters that have some kind of cool attack patterns. So Entropy is a blocker. She has, I feel like, more health than, the average scorer or booster, but she moves like them. So she moves like a scorer. She moves like a booster. Her attacks are extremely, I think, really, really good. Her final, if you just tap square or X on Xbox, her final attack is more like a lunge, so you can kind of bridge the gap. I really like her. I use her more as like a hunter. So instead of camping, right, that's where I think Embryo and Dingo Dial are better used, is to just camp the enemy team. For her, I think she's better out in the field. Go get Wampa Fruit. Go bring it back. Go attack enemies while you're there. You can keep up with them. They can't run away from you. And your stomp thing, your little slam move where it shoots out those bubbles, I think is extremely, extremely powerful. You can get people on the slam, and you can get people on the projectiles that come afterwards. It's a great kind of like 1-2 move. I think her biggest weakness is probably just in terms of the health, like an Embryo doesn't have a lot of health. And I think Embryo is easier to take out than she is. But Embryo, if he drinks the potions, you get health back. And you also can't really be touched during that stage. With her, there's nothing like that. So if you kind of get cornered, she can run away. She's got that mobility where she can leave, but she doesn't have that kind of like super tanky kind of feel to her, and maybe that's on purpose. So she is number 5. Number 4, I'm going with Neo Cortex. I think I put him dead last in my demo, or when the beta came out. I think I put him at the very end. So here's the thing with Cortex. You gotta just get good at him, and I know that's such a silly thing to say, but I think when there's a pro Cortex, right, when you're like an elite Cortex player, I think you've figured out life, because I think you can just do really amazing things. So Cortex kind of has it all. He's really mobile, so he can get away from fights, and he can, engage. The thing that stops him, I think, from being higher is he really does do best at a limited range. So you can't do anything, 30 feet away, but you want to be in that sweet spot of like 5, 6, 7 feet away from an enemy. You don't want to be right there. Now, his dash is pretty powerful. So if you do get cornered, the dash will knock enemies back. It'll deal damage. And it's also a really quick way for him to get out of there, because with his gun and using long range, you really kind of want to camp somebody. If you're doing a gem pad and you're kind of, you're within that 5 or so feet range from somebody, you can just tap over and over and over again, just spam the shoot button. You'll knock their health down quite a bit. His piano drop. Now, the dropping of that one's tough. However, I found some pretty easy ways to make that work. If somebody drops one of those guards on the base, you just drop piano after piano after piano. You can do it from long range. The guard won't hurt you. People may not even notice you're there. If there's a fight in a secluded area, as Cortex, what I do is I don't engage in it, right? So if somebody's fighting, say, over the Wumpa base where you drop off the fruit, if you just stay a few feet back, don't engage, don't get into that fight, just drop pianos, and you can deal an enormous amount of damage. You can shoot them from that range, and they may not even attack you. So I find that to be extremely useful. And then when they run away, he's one of the better characters at tracking them. Like, I think Entropy is one of the better ones at, hey, you're not going to get away from me. I'm going to follow you. I think Cortex is the same way. I think Cortex can follow these people and do really well because you can just shoot them. And I've cornered people like that. I've done a really good job with it. So he's tough. He really is, because he's very specific, and if you don't use him how he's meant to be used, I think he could be like number 8 on a lot of people's lists, but I've just found that if you know how to use him, he can be quite powerful. Number 3, I'm going CatBat. So the new character in Crash Team Rumble, or new character to Crash in general, I think CatBat is freaking awesome. The attacks, very, very powerful. Now, just the normal swiping, it is what it is. It's more about, I guess, the mobility, and I guess it's more about the dive. I mean, CatBat, I think, is extremely powerful in that way. So I would say maybe Crash is the only one. Like, I'm thinking Crash, Coco, and CatBat are probably the best characters of moving around. Now, CatBat has something that nobody else really has, and it's that kind of up and down feel, right? So Crash, Coco, even Cortex maybe, they're more like lateral movements, right? They can do these dashes, and they can get from one place to the next, but like on a flat field. CatBat goes up and down, right? Up and down. And then with the dive, very quick way of getting from point A to point B, number 1, and also extremely powerful. Maybe people will figure it out as like people get better, but I found you can surprise attack people with CatBat's slam. You can just catch people off guard. You can be fighting them like one-on-one and do a dive, and they won't really be ready for it. I mean, it's a big radius when you do the dive with CatBat. You don't have to nail them, right dead center. You can kind of get close and still deal damage. I find it to be very, very powerful. So, obviously a scorer. CatBat's a scorer. You're supposed to go out. You're supposed to get fruit. But this character can just get places easier than any other character. I truly believe that. Now, maybe in some ways it's not as easy, but I think in some ways, again, going up and down, it is very easy to do it, and maybe the easiest out of all these characters. The attacks are more than good. The slam move is more than good. And again, the slam, really good of getting from point A to point B. It's kind of like a glide. It's almost like a Batman Arkham Knight kind of thing. I really like it. I think CatBat's a great character and one of the more fun characters to play in this game. Number 2, I'm going Crash Bandicoot, which means number 1 is Coco, but we'll get there in a second. Crash is awesome. I think Crash is a great character. I think very quickly or very early on when you play this game, you realize Crash is kind of a jack-of-all-trades character, and he is. He's very, very fast. Again, in terms of movement, I love how he moves, and I think you got to get good at it because you can do a lot of sliding. Sliding is a great way of moving from point A to point B, and you don't have to just do it in fights. You could just do it casually. That's what I do. When you're running in thin air, when he does that little run kind of boost thing, I love that. Again, that's a quick way of getting from point A to point B. And then also, he is just really good at everything, so he can get around everywhere nice and easy. Obviously, he's a scorer, but he can fight. I think that's what makes, and that's why I kind of gravitate towards these characters. CatBat, all these characters, they're not tanks. They don't have all this health, but they can more than easily, I think, go one-on-one with a blocker and win. I think any of these top 3 here, CatBat, maybe even Cortex, I think a lot of these characters can go against some of the blockers, maybe even each other, and be completely fine. So Crash's slam move, I think, is extremely good. The spinning attack and chaining the spinning attack. Again, the sliding, which I use in the field to get places quicker, but obviously you use it against enemies as well. Slide, you can run and do that little kind of hit on these enemies. I think Crash is very versatile. I think he can handle himself. You can rely on him to go against a blocker if they're at your base and you say, hey, I have some fruit to deposit. I need to get you out of here. I think Crash can handle it. And then he's just a great character to run around with in the map. And then Coco, very much the same thing. So Coco, I mean, wow. So I think Coco was either dead last or second to last when I did the beta. I put her and Cortex at the very bottom, you know, and that's very surprising to me that she's actually my favorite character. She is just legit elite. And no, please, no debuffs. Do not destroy her. You know, Toys for Bob, if you're watching this, leave her alone. She's fantastic. So what I like about her is she kind of has everything Crash has and then a little more. I actually really think that is Coco in a nutshell. She can do the spin attacks Crash can do. She can do the dashing Crash can do, but when she does the dashing, she does the wall, right? And her special ability is the wall. So I think that's just that one extra thing because she's very mobile. She can get from point A to point B. She's great at doing gem pads, all that jazz. She can fight. She can do a slam. Now, her slam is different than Crash. I think Crash's is probably more powerful, used the right way than Coco's, but she still has a slam, right? So she's close enough. And then she's got that wall. So that wall, I don't know if you can ever kind of train yourself to fight Coco because if you do the wall at the proper time, you know, this game is about kind of following people. You know, I mentioned Entropy and all this. When an enemy is running away, you're going after them, and oftentimes you'll go at them straight. You'll go straight at them, and when Coco just does a wall, you're not expecting that. You hit the wall. Now, you lose a good amount of health there, and it puts her too far for you to reach her. She's gone. So I think she's very good at getting in, getting out. I think she can get in and get out better than maybe CatBat's the only other one because CatBat can fly upwards and nobody can deal with that. So you can't escape as CatBat, maybe easier than anyone. But Coco, she's got the speed that Crash or Cortex has, but she's also got the wall to hurt enemies and to provide distance. And then she's got all the attacks that, you know, the other best characters I think in this game have. So I think she's a jack of all trades, you know, gal. I think she does phenomenal. And man, I can't believe I put her so low because I think you can, just like Crash, you can use her as anything. If you want to, you can use her to camp, for God's sakes. You could use her on gem pads, put up the wall, easy way. The enemy can't get to that gem pad to claim it. I mean, she has blocker kind of DNA in her. She's a good fighter. She doesn't have great health, but she's got great mobility. She's not a scorer, I suppose, but she can. You absolutely can use her for scoring. She really can do everything, and that's I think why I like her so much. So there you go. There's my top 8. We'll have to do this again when Engine and Ripperoo come out, but let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.